Where have all the heroes gone? That's a great question. Let's be honest, our society is craving for authentic warrior servant leaders, heroes, and we seem to be in such short supply. And it begs the question, why? Where have all our heroes gone? Where have all our warrior servant leaders gone? And what can we do about it? Well, our guest today has some great insights and answers to that. We have a dear friend, Jeff Tiegs, retired lieutenant colonel, Delta Force operator, father, husband, man of faith, who has an incredible journey from a PFC as an 18-year-old to retiring as a lieutenant colonel, Airborne, Ranger Tab, Green Beret, Delta Force. Dude, you are the badass of the badasses in my world. Just incredible. So I really want to jump in with you, Jeff, and welcome our listeners back to the Warrior Servant Leader podcast, Taco Tuesday edition, Take Action, Crush Obstacles. Tell us about that journey, man. How did you go from an 18-year-old to where you are today? And then we're going to get into what you're doing in life after the military in a little while, which is also really incredible. So share with us, man.
Thanks for having me. It's great to see you. I hope we get a chance to touch on how long we've been talking about different problems in America. I'm sure we'll get to that towards the end, but starting all the way back in the beginning, you call it a journey. You know, maybe it was a little wandering at first, and then it became a more purposeful journey. But I think it all started, I was just looking for adventure, and I say this to people, I was just good enough at many things to be recognized, but not so good at something that I became specialized, right? And I think that's really how you talk about special operations forces. We talk about a Renaissance man. We talk about this jack of all trades. I was a runner in high school, but I wasn't that fast that the colleges were knocking down my door, right? I wrestled in high school, but nobody was looking at me for my athletic ability. I was smart enough in school, but I wasn't on the honor roll, all that. I just kind of went through and created my own identity, so to speak, because what we're going to talk a lot about today is identity. And I think people that continue to struggle with their identity, it's never too late to figure out who you are. And part of identity is committing to it. Like you try on a couple of different uniforms, you try on a couple of different suits, you pick one you like, and you stay with that thing for a while. And that's kind of how my journey was in the military. I didn't know what I wanted to do. I didn't know who I wanted to be. I thank God that what happened was I became a Ranger. I didn't even know what Rangers were. I joined originally to be a reservist, and I wanted to go the Special Forces route. And while I was in basic training is when I had first heard about Rangers. This is back in 1987. Nobody talked about Rangers. I knew Special Forces because of, Apocalypse Now, John Wayne and the Green Berets. When I went to basic training and they handed me the camouflage uniform, I was confused because I thought we were the OG green, the olive drab uniform from Vietnam. I was like, what is this? I've never even seen this. I was so far removed from the modern military. I call it the modern military in the 80s compared to 2025. It might as well have been Revolutionary War era. So I think I was just looking for an identity and a challenge. And I'll tell you what, the military gave it to me, and very specifically the Rangers. I don't ever want to take anything away from my parents. I grew up in Wisconsin, Midwest boy, very conservative Christian home, living in the suburbs, brother and sister. I think a pretty average upbringing. But I really think what forged my identity were these Ranger NCOs, these squad leaders, these platoon sergeants, these first sergeants that I looked at and said, that's who I want to be. That's who I want to be like. And that began my pursuit into that space. After 5 years in the Rangers, I wanted to move on to Delta Force because I had now learned about Delta Force. And that was the next pursuit for me. But the Army, in its wisdom, would not allow me to try out. I had corrected vision, and my vision wasn't good enough to go to Delta Force. So I was physically inferior. So even though I was enjoying this journey and I wanted this pursuit and I was figuring out my identity, the Army wasn't letting me do what I wanted to do. And I got poopy pants and I decided to get out. So it was an equal balance of I'm a resentful, angry, whatever I was at the time, 23-year-old young man. The Army won't let me do what I want to do. And then the other side of it was, is this what I want as my life? You know, we used to, I think they probably still call them that. I was a lifer, so people don't use the term lifer around me, I guess, when I was in the military. But it was, do I want to be a lifer? Is this what I want to do for my life? And I wasn't sure. So I decided to get out, go to college, and explore that side of things. I returned to running. That was my refuge. That was my identity through college, was a runner. I ran ran D1 in school. I went to UNC Wilmington and then transferred out to Montana State. And while at Montana State, I really began to realize, man, I've got some skills, some actual skills, some tactical skills, some leadership skills that I'm just kind of leaving on the sidelines. And I'd like to imbue those into some of these students, very specifically the ROTC program that they had at Montana State. So I started to train these young men and women and share my experiences as a Ranger. I'd experienced in combat in Desert Storm and Panama. So I had some things that I thought I could add to their seasoning before they became officers. And slowly but surely, Pat, I began to realize and recognize, I think I'm just a soldier. You know, I think I'm a protector. And I think as I was going through college, I was starting to lean towards that identity. And that's what I would challenge our speakers, or listeners, not speakers, we're the speakers. I would challenge our listeners. Can you winnow down your identity to one word? I'm going to ask that to you, Pat. If you had to tell me who you were in one word, not father, you don't get 3 or 4 words. You get one word. What would be the one word you would describe yourself as?
Driven.
Driven. Okay, but that's not a noun.
Okay, a noun. Okay. Boy, that's tough because I use all 3 words, but if I had to between warrior, servant, leader, yes. I would pick leader.
Okay, but I'll go with warrior dash servant dash leader, right?
Okay.
That's perfect. Warrior servant leader. And I actually really like that because so am I. I am a warrior servant leader, 100%. If I had to, drill down to one, I would also say protector. I like warrior. Yeah. I like protector. I like all of those things. But if I said to you, Pat, do you identify as a protector? I know what your answer would be.
Obviously, and then that kind of the interesting thing. I just want to something you picked up on that you finally realized or accepted, and you said, "I'm just a soldier," and in mine, and my 30-year career in law enforcement is I really got away from, I started out saying, hey, I'm just a cop. But then I realized, well, no, that cop, that badge, that uniform, that responsibility, or when you do the heroes, the guys that get the Medal of Valor, that get MOH in the military, and they go, oh, I was just doing my job. And I just want to grab them and say, oh, you weren't doing just your job. You were going above and beyond, and I like your humility, but man, understand and accept those congratulations and attaboys because you're unique. Because so many people in our professions, whether it's law enforcement or the military, don't have that warrior mindset. They're here for the 4 or 6 years signing, up and volunteering, or they're a cop and go, hey, I can always go do something else, and don't have that. That's why I say driven, that I'm driven to that commitment, like you. So, and in your book, man, I'm telling you, I'm on Blood and Guts chapter right now. So it's, I don't mean to interrupt you like that, but
No.
I know where you're going is that you came to that initial observation or understanding of who you are, but not what your purpose
Yeah. Yeah.
is
No,
going to
that
be.
Pat, that's a great catch, and I'm glad you brought it up because I agree with you. And what I should have said is not the word just. I should have said simply. So now, you know, what I mean, like I'm simply a soldier. I'm simply a warrior. I'm simply a protector. You know, those are things that are identity monikers, right? That's what my
Mhm.
identity is. I'm not a Green Beret. I'm not a Ranger. You know, and when and that's why even as I go through this journey, I might have identified as a soldier early on, but even that morphed to protector, warrior, commando. It continued to morph, and I like what you said because I say that to people too. Whenever I meet a vet, and they know my background, they're like, "Oh, I was only a tanker. I was only a submariner." It's like, no, dude, it's not only. You know, you're already in that strata of rare air of being a servant leader to your community and to this country. So it's a really good catch. I agree with 100%. And you know what I mean to say is I'm beginning to figure out my identity. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But on this journey, I'm gonna fast forward. This could be the whole podcast. I'm gonna fast forward now to about the time that I'm a major. Okay, so I'm able to come back. I come back in the military as an officer. I go back to the Ranger Battalion. I go to 10 Special Forces Group. I get to Delta Force, and I don't even. I think this was while I was in Delta Force. I have some weird memories. Right, I'm sure you're the same. Where like my memories get mixed up. Like
Hmm.
I think I'm a major in Delta Force, but but I'm experiencing this in Breckenridge, Colorado, which means I was in 10th Group. You know what I mean? Like this memory doesn't make sense, but it's a very vivid memory to me. And I was having a little bit of a soul searching because I'd been away from my family for so long. I'm watching my kids, my two sons, grow up from a distance. I'm watching my wife like float away in a boat. You know what I mean? Because
Yeah.
I'm the one who's getting in the boat going to faraway lands to fight, but it's like she's just slowly getting further and further away. My kids, even though they're growing taller, they're harder for me to see, right? Because I'm just so committed to America's wars. And I look back at that, and I will defend it, and I don't think I could do much different because the men and women I was taking into combat, that was an immediate risk of death. If
Hmm.
I wasn't committed, if I wasn't wholly in on what it was we were doing, they might not come home, or they might not come home with a limb. You know, where I was confident in my wife, I was confident in the community that we had built back home. But regardless, I'm seeing all this unfold and I'm thinking, why am I doing this? I'm already recognizing the wars are lost. We're not going to win Iraq. We're not going to win Afghanistan. What is this sacrifice? So this is where I'm skipping over some parts, you know, probably, I don't know what that is now, a decade, 15 years of service, to where now I go from a soldier to this protector, but it's also this idea of I know war and I know warfare and I know how we can win a war. You know, America can still win wars. You know, like people say this, you know, violence isn't the answer. Oh, really? You know what I mean?
No.
Violence has been the answer since the dawn of man, but it's good people applying violence against bad people. And when you enter a conflict like a war, you better be set out to win it. The way we shackled ourselves, you know, all the way from, you know, we did it in Korea, we did it in Vietnam, we've done it in all the wars that I've fought. We fought with both our hands tied behind our back, an eye patch, and our legs hobbled. If you're going to enter a war, then defeat your enemy. You know, so I understood that. And I also understood, because I was at this highest levels of special operations and this sophistication of war, these other aspects of war, by, through, and with, you know, the kind of the spy game where you're not wearing a uniform, you're out, you know, doing
Right. Yeah.
clandestine things and covert things. I see this capacity for America to really protect itself and really make a much more equal playing field for these other nations. So here's a story. I've shared it before, and I don't. This is one of those things. I don't know where this memory comes from, but I remember waking up late one night, and I go downstairs. Again, this doesn't make any sense to me because I'm in Breckenridge, Colorado at this condo that we used to go to in the summer. We used to rent. This is my memory. I go downstairs. I turn on the TV, and remember Charlie Rose? I used to love Charlie Rose and his roundtable because his discussions it was early podcast when you think about it. You know, he had people from all walks of life, and the story just went everywhere.
Right.
So I flip it on, and there's this beautiful woman, and she's a ballerina. And she's now, let's say 40. She was probably 30, right? What she's already aged out of being a lead in a ballet, but she's still in it. And she's talking to Charlie, and she's talking about all the sacrifices she's made and how her body is broken and how her family life has been so constrained because she has been wholly committed to dance. But what she realized is she recognizes and understands she's walked a very, very unique path, and she understands the potential of dance. She understands the potential of dance to transform lives and to build communities. And I'm sitting here watching this beautiful ballerina, and it's like she's speaking directly to me. And I'm realizing that's it. I might be sacrificing pieces of my body and much of my relationship, but I've walked this very unique path, and I understand the potential of war. I understand that conflict really is the state of things. Peace, you know, that's one of the things you learn early in the military. War is the constant state. It's internecine periods of peace that is the anomaly, right? When you look back through history. So I remember sitting there going, I get it. I agree with her. I am a commando. I am a protector. I understand the potential of what it is we're doing. I'm going to stick it out a little bit longer. So I remember that story as I'm speaking this to you, Pat, vividly. And I've searched Charlie Rose, and I found the woman. I found the ballerina. Really? You know.
Yeah.
But I watched the clip, and this never comes up. She never says it. So I don't know if it happened and this piece was cut out in this YouTube version of whatever it was. I don't understand this memory, but I understand what it meant to me. So as you know, tying back into what you said, I think this journey started as a young man trying to find his identity, and it ended as an old man refining his identity, you know. And once I settled on this idea of a protector, that also as my journey began to close in uniform, and looking at things to do next, that was the logical leap into counter trafficking and taking the skills and the leadership and this servant warrior mentality into another battlefield.
Wow. Yeah, man, that's fascinating. And I know your story. We sat at my kitchen table in Colorado Springs when you were on terminal leave and getting ready to try and stand up a anti-human trafficking initiative or life after the military. But as you're telling that story, and you talk about crazy, this is what actually came to mind to me, was picturing Paul, the apostle, when he was Saul, the killer, the headhunter of Christians and whatnot, and that making that transition of realizing the skills that you have. And he was a Pharisee. He was well educated. He was a Roman citizen. He had all these skill sets, but when he came to the realization of, in your case, being a protector, a guardian, and that whole concept of if you're going to go to war, you go to win, is that Paul's transition, that and Peter and all the apostles except for John were martyred, and yet they still, knowing that they were going down this path, they knew their identity, they knew their calling, they knew their gifts, their skills, and I know you are a student of Sun Tzu and the Art of War, as I am, and people think this whole idea of being a warrior, being a protector, going to battle is about killing people all the time, and it's not. Sun Tzu's biggest thing was it was about his people. And and I translated his, the way, the weather, to the terrain, the leadership, his concepts. I finally realized he's talking about doing the right things at the right time, the right way, and for the right reasons. And that's a high calling.
Yeah.
And sometimes in war, like spiritual warfare, you don't go to war. I said this to a class I was teaching yesterday down in Fort Lauderdale. No, we're like Olympians. We're, as cops, and I was a former prosecutor, is we go to court to win. And there's no Olympian who trains and spends and sacrifices so much to reach that pinnacle. They don't go to the Olympics and go, man, I'm going to shoot for a bronze today, or maybe a silver medal. No, man, they go for the gold, and if they don't get it 4 years later, or even if they do get it, you take Michael Spitz, the fame, my lifetime, and then the swimmers, Phelps, yeah. Man, you got all these medals. Kick back, retire, go on the speaker's tour, write a book, do things and enjoy life. And no, they keep that grind up because they're going like Paul says. I'm running a race, and I haven't gotten to the finish line yet. So all those thoughts were going through my head as you were sharing. This is history being repeated itself over thousands of years.
Well, one of the things I love about podcasts is you never know where it's going to go, but you trust the podcaster. And again, we're old friends, so you've got enough here to finish us for another hour. But you bring up Sun Tzu, and one of my favorite quotes of Sun Tzu is, "Know yourself and know your enemy, and you need not fear the result of 100 battles or 1,000 battles, depending on how they've translated it." And I like that. And you go into somebody's office and they have it up on the wall. But the hardest part of that is knowing yourself. And it starts with know yourself and know your enemy. And I think too often what we started talking about was establishing your own identity. Who are you? And too often people jump beyond that, and they begin to study their opposition, or they're driven for some sort of success, and they don't even really know themselves. And here's the secret, guys and gals. You know who the enemy most of the time is? It's you.
Yep.
So know yourself, know your enemy. There is no combatant that has an inside angle on you more than you. Your doubts, your fears, the weaknesses, the temptation, these things that you live with, that's your enemy.
The ego.
Exactly.
Ryan Holiday's great book, Ego is the Enemy. And I've read that and reread it, and I'm like, holy crap, I just got smacked up the head that your ego is your biggest enemy.
Exactly. So Sun Tzu's being redundant. Know yourself and know your enemy. Yeah, the enemy is you. And I really like I like what you mentioned between Saul and Paul. I'm going to do some work on that because you've been digging through my book, and there's a similar vein that I've been walking through with David. Where it's like David and his identity, and we'll definitely close with how men don't finish strong. But this conversion from Saul to Paul, and even Peter on the boldness. And what I like about those things too, especially as believers, it's like, are you walking the walk? Like some of you are talking the talk. Very, very few of you are walking the walk, and that's what you're not even in the race. Like these things that you talked about. Here's the deal. We've already won. This is you talk about this Olympian. If you think of Michael Phelps, or you think of these Olympian, and they know you've already got the gold medal. What I need you to do is X, Y, and Z. That's all I need you to do. And I need you to believe that the medal is yours. And that's the equivalent of being a believer.
Yeah.
We win. In the
Yeah.
end, we win.
And we know we know the end of the story.
Exactly.
It's resurrection.
Yeah, here's something super cool that I was at this. I went to this Orthodox. Actually, it was in Cheyenne, Wyoming, not too far from you. I went to this Greek Orthodox church, which the only Greek Orthodox churches I've ever been in were in Jerusalem. You know what I mean? And they were speaking Greek, so I didn't really understand their tradition of the chanting. You know, I thought, to me, the chanting was always this, you know, kind of mumbling, but it was in Greek, you know, or it was in Aramaic. But when they were doing their chants in English, they're telling a story for an hour. It was really fascinating. And I was talking to some of I'm sorry, I don't know what you call them, fathers, priests, bishops, pastors. I'm not sure what they are, the men of the cloth. And one of the guys said to me, you know, the last book in the Bible isn't Revelations, it's Revelation. It's the revelation of Jesus Christ. And all these people that are jumping through hoops, trying to read all these little details in these signs, it's really simple. This is the revelation of Jesus Christ. He came to this earth as a humble man. He lived like a humble man. He allowed himself to be beaten and crucified. And then he rose from the dead, ascended into heaven. And here's the revelation. He comes back like a warrior and a king. All of this stuff that people are jumping through hoops to try to figure out when is the last day. No, you're missing the point. Mm-hmm. He comes back with our gold medals around his neck. He's coming back to vanquish the enemy once and for all. And you and I, Pat, we stand there and he hangs the gold medal around our neck. You know, it is the revelation of him as this warrior king. And the things they talk about, him coming back on a white horse and a white robe up to his knees in blood. It's like the ultimate end of violence will be done by our king. So it really bothers me that believers don't live like they've got a gold medal waiting for them. That bothers me. It bothers me even more that believers live like they're not even in the race. It bothers me even more that a believer thinks he's in the race, but he's looking for shortcuts and he's cheating.
Yeah.
This isn't that hard. I went to, I spoke at a sheriff's conference the other day, and one of the things that I was trying to convey some of these messages with is this idea of, are you playing chess or are you playing checkers? You know, and I think too often people want to complicate things. They want to pretend they're playing chess. No. Half of these moves are checker moves. Are you doing the right thing? Right. You know, why are you overthinking everything that you're doing? And doing the right thing, that's not a chess move.
No, it's not.
That's a checkers move. You want to pile stuff onto that. So, you know, I guess my challenge is for our listeners is really try to drill down on who your identity is. If you're a young man or a young woman, try on a couple things. Try on. And if you pray to God to help you recognize and identify that, he's going to help you. And I think the other thing too is really, really try to identify where you feel comfortable. And there's all sorts of personalities. And then just lastly, the last one too is then my next challenge is really try to identify if you're playing checkers or chess. And most of our day is playing checkers. When you think you're playing chess, pause a minute and try to understand and recognize, is this decision really that complicated? Most of the time, it's not, especially if you know who you are and you know what your duty is.
And that's a great analogy, because so often we're reactive instead of, and you used the word fear, and I've always been there's two kinds. Fear is a good thing depending on how you define it. And if your definition of fear is to forget everything and run, FEAR, just like, I don't want to face this challenge, I don't want to face this obstacle. It's a negative mindset and fear. And I'm not talking about the getting the crap scared out of you by going to a horror movie, kind of thing. Just everyday life, we face fear, and we have to either forget everything and run, or face everything and respond. And so often, though, when we respond, it's a visceral gut reaction, and we're not strategic about it. And I love what you say about try on a few things to discover, because it is, yeah, and you know the verses that that God loved you before you were ever even formed in the womb, and He consecrated you, which means He has a purpose for you before you were ever even born. And part of our responsibility is in relationship with God is, what is that consecration? What am I called to do? We all, and I don't mean just a career, but and you know this about me is, I was a district attorney practicing law, and then became a cop, and started at the bottom.
Kind of backwards.
Yeah, and that's what. And, oh, my mom and dad were disappointed, and this, that, and the other thing. And my first reaction is, well, you didn't pay my tuition for law school. I did, and I hate what I'm doing. I was shoveling paper, and my wife saw that. And I was 28 years old. We've been married 6 years, and we got married when I was in law school. And I came home one day, and she goes, "Pat, you're miserable. You're a pain in the ass to be around, kind of." And we had 2 kids at that point, and she goes, "What do you really want to be doing?" And I said, "I've wanted to be a cop since I was a little kid." And I don't know, if that was just, Serpico movie or or whatever,
Charles Bronson, Clint Eastwood, they had a lot of impact on us growing up in the 70s.
And so and this was her suggestion, and she's an incredible woman of faith. I mean, we're coming up on in September 45 years being married, and she said, "Well, can you do it part-time and see if you really like it and it likes you?" And so I went to my boss, the first assistant prosecutor, and says, "Hey, I'm interested in going into full-time law enforcement, and there's a small township police department outside of Dayton." I talked to the chief, and he said he'll bring me on as an auxiliary officer, and I work 1 8-hour shift a week for $10. And the 8-hour shift was 11 at night to 7 in the morning.
Nice.
So I was getting a real dose of police work, not sitting behind a desk as a paper pusher. So I did that for a year, and then I took the test and joined the police department, and I found my niche, if you want. Yeah. I found my calling, and at first it was just this. I want to be not even a great cop. I just want to be a good cop, sure, kind of deal. And how that then grew into, like you, with a very defined protector, guardian mindset, which took over years. But the same thing, I was at home, you weren't, and my wife, after Marilyn told me years after I retired, she goes, "Do you realize that for most of your career, I felt like a single parent raising our kids?" Yeah, because I was working midnights. She goes, we'd go on vacation, and you're on the beach on your cell phone talking to informants instead of engaging and being part of the family and everything. And I'm like, man, what a gut punch that I deserved. And I have to own that. So it's not a perfect life just because you found your calling. Just ask the apostles. They all found their calling. How'd that work out? I mean, in the end, because we know the end of the story. Sure. But and that's the fascinating thing about this journey is we all know our beginning. Like I was born to a 39-year-old widow in Ireland, and she put me in an orphanage when I was 3 days old. I know my beginning. Only God knows the end. Yeah. And that's part of the trust and everything we go through. And I really, people go, "Oh, I wish Jesus would come back now and, the end times." And I so much want to go. I can tell you when your end time is. It's the day you die. You don't have to wait for, revelations. Christ coming back in the cloud as a warrior. Your end time is the day you die, and that's the day you get to meet Jesus in person. You don't have to wait for the end times.
Yeah, and are you living for it?
Right.
So once again, Pat, you hit 100 things. And what's ironic? I don't know if you even caught this as you were speaking. You started this idea that God knew you in the womb. He knit you in the womb, and then you actually ended your idea with He knows your ending. Yeah, He knows your beginning and He knows your ending. Yeah. He knows your whole story, and He knows your role in this tapestry that He's created. And I don't understand it, and it doesn't feel like it.
That's the mystery.
Yes, that's the mystery. And I talk to folks because ironically, let me go back to one thing we talked about: know yourself, know your enemies. We talked a lot about know yourself. I want to go back to this idea of how you and I met. That I was studying my enemy. So I'm now leaving the military and looking at a new enemy, and that enemy is the American pimp. Which is the American trafficker. I wish we would just stop using the word pimp and use the word trafficker, use the word abuser, use some other word than pimp, because it's got this crazy, it's picked up some positive connotation, Yeah. So as I began to study my enemy, that's where I bumped into you, because you were an expert in this space, So I thank you for pouring in those early days and continuing to be a sounding board over this last 10, 12 years as we've progressed. But what I'm getting at is, even though I feel very strongly that God has called me into this space, into the counter sex trafficking space, I don't understand the wandering. I don't understand the roadblocks. I'm on this path with the tiny light ahead of me, dutifully walking step by step by step, and I run into a cliff, and I have to turn around and go back. But what brings me solace, and again, this goes back to the book and what I was trying to relate to people. My faith isn't skin deep. It's in my tissue. It's in my soul. And when I read things like from the Old Testament to the New Testament, the Old Covenant to the New Testament, the Old Testament ends, the New Testament begins with Matthew. Pat, do you know how much time transpired between those two books?
Yeah, thousands.
400.
Or 400 years. Yeah.
400 years.
Of
400 years of silence. God did not personally speak to the Israelite people for 400 years, dude. How about, do you know how long the Israelites were captive in Egypt? 400 years. So you read these things and you're like, oh, okay, yeah, but when you stop and ponder it, you're like, nope, 400 years the Israelites were slaves. Like, that's unfathomable. That's twice the age of our country that you're a slave. And they maintained that identity, and they maintained an eye on God who came back to them. So now they're slaves for 400 years. All these incredible, miraculous things happen with the plagues to gain their freedom, to walk out of Egypt. And then what happens next? They literally walk in circles in the desert for 40 years.
And, I went to graduated from a 4-year biblical studies program. Me and my wife did. We did it together. And I always wondered, why 40 years? And the answer was fascinating, because that was the life expectancy of everyone that came in the Exodus, including Moses, that were not going to enter the only at Jericho. Joshua was the only one, because they wandered. It was literally about a 40-day walk, if you wanted. Yeah, and it took them 40 years because of their lack of faith and their obstinance and all that kind of stuff. And it is fascinating. I want to jump into Skull Game Solutions.
Yes.
Where you're at now, your life after the military. That's what we said. It wasn't Skull Games when we first met and whatnot. You were going to stand up a group to interdict human trafficking. I think you read my article in the American Military
Is that the start?
Yeah,
Oh,
yeah,
I remember that, and I just cold called you.
yeah. You
I
did.
said, "Hey,
Yeah,
Pat, can
yeah,
you chat?" Yeah.
yeah. And so tell us about Skull Games and how you've taken all that skill set and gifts that you've had, and now you're applying it in another arena, trying to rescue victims of human trafficking.
Yeah. So let me tie these two thoughts together. Where were we going? So I am absolutely over the moon with where we're at in this space. So the exact same things that I sat at your table talking about this vision on how you could have a group of volunteers with experience in open source intelligence, building packets, working by through with American law enforcement to identify women that are being trafficked, identify the predators, and help them develop operations and campaigns. That concept, Pat, is alive.
That's
The
great.
funding for it sucks. So once again, I'm in this fight because I can see the potential. I can see how a private community of trained and vetted analysts can really support law enforcement. So I'm in this for the potential. I'm also in this because I do have this solace, even though it feels to me too often that I'm walking in circles in the Sinai Desert trying to reach the promised land. I am confident that God is preparing something. So I think there are some supernatural reasons why they walked around for 40 years. There are some very practical reasons, and we'll never know. But some conditions had to be met before they were ready to enter the promised land. And that's the mystery for me. God called me into this space. He's called everyone that works on our team into this space because they sacrifice a lot. But he's only giving us incremental successes. You know what I mean? He's showing us I keep running the race. You know what I mean?
Right.
Keep running the race. And maybe I thought the race was 100 meters. Nope. Oh, maybe it's at 800. Nope. This race is an ultra marathon. I wasn't expecting this to be an ultra marathon, but it's forced me to slow down, and it's forced us to build a team of people that we really trust and empower everybody. So it's been an incredible, beautiful journey. So again, we provide operational analytical support to law enforcement, and we can do this in any city across the country. I'll tell you, one of our favorite partners that we've had is in Fountain, Colorado. They and we specialize in these smaller towns. So when you look at Colorado Springs or Denver, we really like the smaller suburbs because they, by and large, have the same trafficking problem.
Mm-hmm.
And in fact, it's the same enemy, but it's easier to get at them because a Denver pimp feels pretty comfortable in Pueblo or pretty comfortable in Fountain or pretty comfortable in Falcon. You know what I mean? So it's easier to hunt these fringes to recover these women and get these traffickers because their head's not so much on a swivel because of the Aurora Police Department or somebody who's pretty hot at what they do. Mm-hmm. So tactically, it's a hunting ground that we like. And then the other piece is political. I'm going back to this idea of, dude, you get into these cities and they all think they're playing chess. No, dude, arrest traffickers. It's not that complicated. Oh, but all the politics. You can't do this. You can't do that. The governor wants to do this. The mayor wants to do this. The DA. So when you get to these small towns where all it takes is one or two iron corporals, this is probably a term our listeners don't remember, but I'll leave it to you to look up that idea of the iron corporal. When you find that iron corporal in this small town, they have the authority and they have the capacity after we walk through them with the training with them in these operations to really do some wonderful things. So Fountain is one of our highlight stories. What ends up happening often, though, is in these small towns, we're working with a cop or a detective, and they are crushing it so much as a human trafficking detective that they get promoted into something else. And then we kind of have to start over and make all those relationships again. But that's our specialty, identification. The interdiction side, we're super unique, where we have law enforcement on our staff. Do you still carry credentials anywhere?
I've retired, so
okay.
no.
Yeah. So we've got a bunch of cops that still carry credentials. So they're still cops. They're credentialed cops in certain regions. Many of them are working with HSI, and they have different credentials.
Right.
So they can do all the cop-like stuff. They can do arrests. They can do all that stuff. They can carry. And what that does for us is it helps us bridge the gap between a private citizen who has no business looking at the proprietary information that police do. And it also has cop to cop talk and cop to cop support. So when we coach law enforcement on how to conduct these operations, we have a cop there, and they can help coach them through the intricacies of this. Yeah. So again, going back to checkers and chess, should you arrest traffickers in your community? That's checkers. That's a yes. How do you do it? Now we're playing chess. Oh, I wanted to mention too, back when you were talking about becoming a cop, that was a checkers move. You knew young that you wanted to be a cop. You had this identity as a protector, and you got caught up in the chess. You got caught up in being a DA or aim higher or say come in at this level, and you began to realize and recognize. And again, boldly, I want people to really think about this. When I say chess to checkers, this isn't a downgrade. Most times it's an upgrade, because you're stepping over this game. You're stepping over this simplicity of the answers right in front of you. It's black or red, right? Black or red.
You know why I became a lawyer? Because everybody told me I'd be a good lawyer, including my parents. I was living up to everybody else's expectations of my talents.
Yep.
And
again, this isn't the best analogy or metaphor, but that's what I'm talking about with chess.
Yeah.
People try to convince you to start playing chess when I just need to be here at this checker space.
Yeah. Tell us, because you said that the funding sucks. You're a 501c3.
We are. Yep.
Yeah, you're a nonprofit, and so you have to raise your own revenues to make this mission and vision a reality and keep going. And I don't know how you do it. I want our listeners to understand that this is a huge, because you do it all over the country.
We do it all over the country. And the vision, and this was when you and I were talking about, we talked more about the enemy, right? And how would you do counter sex trafficking? What have you seen that was successful? I don't think you and I really talked about how do you raise money for it, because in my naivete, I felt, well, this is a no-brainer. Americans will want to protect children. Americans will want to protect women. Americans will want to protect the most vulnerable in their communities. And it boggles my mind that desire isn't there. And the simple concept is, you have a public, I'm going to call it public organization, law enforcement, that is tasked with doing X, Y, and Z. You have a group of private citizens like me and the people in our task force that have a skill. We've developed a capacity and a capability and a level of wisdom. We haven't developed or created wealth. And then you have another group of people in America who've created wealth. So the simple idea is, we have this public organization, law enforcement. We've got this private organization, the nonprofit called Skull Game Solutions. And then you have the philanthropic arm of men and women across America that have created wealth. What are you going to do with that wealth? Mm-hmm. And I thought this was like the magic Venn diagram of all of us coming together.
Field of dreams. You build it, they will come.
Again, it's built, guys. It's built, and no one's coming. And there are some simple things, for the listeners to think through. It's not funded. There is no real thing as an analytical arm, an intelligence arm for law enforcement. There is at the federal level, but there really isn't at the low level. People don't understand that. You'll have, let's say Denver has 3 analysts for the entire city. Now how do you get that analyst to look at trafficking when they've got murder cases and all these other types of things? So that was one of the things I learned, that intel and operations in the military, they're hand in glove. There really is no intel capacity in law enforcement, and they shouldn't boggle people's mind, because the checkers definition of law enforcement, it's in the word. They enforce laws. They're not the CIA is the Central Intelligence Agency. You know what I mean? Like, law enforcement is there to enforce laws. this idea of getting ahead of breaking the law, recognizing and understanding all of this stuff, it's not built into our system. So we're taking this military mindset of intelligence and analysis, applying it very narrowly to this crime category of commercial sex trafficking, and creating an entire new way of doing things for law enforcement. And they're the ones that have the authority to carry out these activities. So it's been remarkable. And then the third piece of our line of effort, we have the identification, the interdiction, and then it's the empowerment. And this is probably the easiest one for folks to support as well. I welcome anybody to apply to be part of the task force. If you're an open source intel person, and what does that mean? Go figure it out. If you don't know what it means, you probably shouldn't apply. If this is tugging on your heart, then go figure out what this means. Get a little bit of training. We will select, assess, and train people. We've got about 300 to 400 volunteers across the country that are doing intel work for us. They're all vetted and trained. So I invite people to look at the task force. I invite any law enforcement out there who's interested in what we can do to support you and help you out. Love to do it. And then lastly, it's this empowerment. And we call this the Task Force Society. This is for anybody to be involved. Invite us out. We do a lot of self-defense. We do a lot of community events. We do things where we empower women that have been abused, not specifically trafficking victims, even though we do that. We try to do that every quarter. We try to hold a 2 or 3 day event where survivors come to a retreat, and we teach them jujitsu, and we teach them shooting with airsoft, and put together team building things and kind of work them through this healing. It's a really spiritually heavy healing that comes with that. So there's a lot of things. The identification, interdiction, and the empowerment are all pieces that people can get involved in, and it's all pieces that people can support.
So how do they do that? How do they reach out to Jeff Tiegs?
Yep, skullgames.org. Go to our website, and you'll see these things. You'll see them broken down into identification, interdiction, and empowerment. If you want to be part, the easiest thing again is join the Task Force Society. That's this grassroots level where we're continuing to share with you all what it is we're doing. You're able to get involved. If you have the skills to be an OSINT analyst in our task force, then you can apply. You'll find that on our website as well. But really, I can't overstate our need to just get funding. We're doing this at pennies on the dollar, and we really are interested to expand to as many states as we can here as soon as we can.
That's awesome. So skull as in?
Yep. Skullgames.org. Yeah.
.org. And so you guys are headquartered out in Bend, Oregon?
No,
or you don't?
Yeah, we're not really headquartered. I believe. Okay, I'm the president and founder, but again, I've got a deputy that took care of all this. Our deputy lives not far from you. At Monument or Castle Rock or up there. He's up there. So I'm pretty sure we're incorporated in Colorado. I live in Oregon. We have one of our people lives in Florida. Another one lives in North Carolina. Another one lives in Texas. And then our lead intel lives in Toronto, Canada. So we don't really have an office, which again, for people donating, look, you guys, our overhead is almost nothing. We have to fund ourselves. We need to have salaries so we can commit to this 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. And we have to travel to interdict the problem. Other than that, we don't have any overhead. So that's so
it goes to actual getting operational stuff done.
Yes.
It enables you guys to do that. And you literally have done this all over the United States. You're not just west of the Mississippi
From West Coast to East Coast, north to south, and where we go is where the money leads, right? Like, so our big customers right now are Texas and Oklahoma, Mississippi. We're opening up a big campaign in Tennessee in just a couple of weeks. And there's really nothing special about those places other than somebody decided to fund it. Texas was a state grant. Oklahoma was a donor gift. Mississippi is because we have long time relationships with some law enforcement there. And we're just now beginning to open up a campaign in Tennessee. So those are our big customers, but I couldn't even list all the states that we work in. Again, Fountain is a great example.
Yeah,
We were in Fountain probably every quarter for a year. We probably did 3, 4, 5 operations in Fountain. Well, now they're on autopilot. So Fountain will just call us and say, hey, we're going to do an operation in August. Can you guys help us develop the leads? Can you guys give us our support? We don't even have to be in Colorado to do it. So we have that relationship all over the country still.
And I think it's really important for people to, when they talk about human trafficking, and because it has gotten such little exposure, I liken it to, we're in the early stages of understanding human trafficking like we were back in the 80s with domestic violence. And why does a battered woman keep going back to her batterer and all that? And cops would like, well, yeah, this is the 8th time we've arrested this guy. She's just going to drop charges. And it did not have law enforcement did not have the empathy and the understanding of the psychology of being a victim of this type of crime. I think in human trafficking, we're still kind of in those early stages, and people go, well, it's not happening here. Well, yes, it is, because I worked with Colorado Springs PD for 3 years. Here's the easiest way to understand why human trafficking is so prolific across the country, even if you don't see it. It is a business, and it's an illegal business. But if you take a legit business and you talk about the 90-minute market for selling your product, it looks like this. If you look at a map of the United States, go north to south, 90, 80, 70, 40, 10, east and west. And then you go 1, 5, 15, 25, 75, 95, going north and south. They use traffickers, whether it's dope or human trafficking, they use the same business model to make money that legit businesses are using. And so, yes, it is in your community, just like every other legal product is in your community or service. I mean, they're like the Amazon of human trafficking. They go everywhere and anywhere, but they stay under the radar, which is why I think you said they're not easier, but it is a little bit easier to identify them in the smaller communities. And I got to have you back, Jeff, because your first chapter in your book was so fascinating. You used the Easter egg analogy of applying it to what you did in Delta Force and what you're doing now. And so I want to have you back to talk about really simplifying down to why this is such a tragedy in our communities, and how you guys are it's doing the Easter egg hunt, kind of thing. So skullgames.org.
Yep.
Can they, if they wanted to shoot you an email, you got a Skull Games business?
Yeah, I mean, they can send it to me. You may not get a reply just because I get overloaded. It's my name, Jeff Tiegs, at skullgames.org. Lauren at skullgames.org. She's admin who handles most of this. So yeah, I think the easiest is probably just go to the website, whatever the contact is there.
Okay.
And then Lauren's going to hate me, but yeah, go to Lauren, Lauren at skullgames.org. Let her know what is that you're ever interested in. You can email me, but again, as I get overloaded, I don't know if you're this way, Pat, too, but like I feel guilty. Like my inbox gets so full, or I'm looking at my computer right now. I have a follow-ups due, and I'll go into that thing every couple months, and I just hit delete, and I'm like, oh, I'm sorry, sorry, no, but I'm getting overloaded. You know?
Well, just you and I hooking up just to get this done. It's like, hey, we're both at home. In our home bases right now. Yesterday I was in Florida, and you and we're just all over the place. So we are busy. But so just real quick, with the society you're talking about, so people, it can be something as simple as just getting on your newsletter
Yep.
thing to keep informed, and then
Yeah.
when something touches your heart of, hey, I want to step up this month or whatever, that's something they can do.
Yeah. And the other thing we really invite people to do, because we have task force members all over. So even though our biggest customers right here, I mentioned those states, our biggest supplier of our task force is Virginia. And I think that's because a lot of our intel analysts are coming out of the military. They're working for the government and all, and all these different things. But wherever you are across the country, to host a Skull Game Society event, let us know. Say, hey, I'd like to host an event at a pub. I'd like to host a community event. And if it's not someone from our core team, we only have 6 people that are like full-time Skull Game staff. The rest are volunteers. But we're really trying to grow this grassroots where we show up. And I tell you, Pat, dude, host one for us. Pick a place, a pub where we can meet at one of these days, and people can just meet us, and they can meet survivors. They can meet cops. They can meet our analysts. They can really get a personal view of what this looks like. We have little games that we play and interactive type experiences, so you get a better feel of who we are and what we do. So please hit up Lauren, invite us out for a society event. I will try to go as much as I can, especially if you fund it. If you fund it, I will come. It's that kind of a scenario. Unfortunately, as a nonprofit, that's we live or die by donations.
Okay, Jeff, dude, it's so good to have you here. We'll talk offline and get you scheduled to come back, because I am telling you, folks, read this book, Where Have All the Heroes Gone? A Pilgrimage Through the Bible, the Battlefield, and Back Home Again by Jeff Tiegs. I have learned stuff in there. I never knew why David picked up 5 stones until I read your book.
Yeah.
And it's like, holy cow. So I couldn't put it down. And like I said, I'm on Blood and Guts chapter right now. So to everybody out there, man, if this episode resonates with you, reach out to Jeff, reach out to me, warriorservantleaderpodcast.com, and just ask your questions, find out how you can be a part of something bigger than yourself without having to, sell all your belongings and become a missionary kind of deal. We're not talking that. We're talking about everyday people with real problems, with real solutions, and a real commitment. And we'd love you to come on board. So connect with us. For Jeff, he gave you skullgames.org. For me, you can email me, pjwelshllc@gmail.com, or best thing, jump on the warriorservantleaderpodcast.com website. Join our newsletter. It's 800 strong and growing. And be a part of something of being a warrior, leader, and servant, and a hero in your everyday life, doing everyday things. So, Jeff, thank you. We'll jump offline and talk some more and get you back. Everybody, see you next Tuesday. Taco Tuesday. Take action, crush obstacles.